What is up, gamers? How are we doing? It's Jay Parm again. I know it's been a while since my last upload, but today I want to give you a first time we're doing a review on this channel for the new Superman movie. I was lucky enough yesterday to go see an early screening of it, and I wanted to sleep it over on how I felt about the movie. And I gotta say, I didn't like it all that much. We're going to get into that though. This is not scripted. This is really off the cuff. This is just some of my initial thoughts. I'm going to be seeing the movie again tomorrow. We may do a spoiler section at the end of this. Who knows? I think that James Gunn has a vision for this new DC universe. I'm excited to see what it is. The only problem is I don't know if it's for new DC fans. I'm pretty sure that this is for people who already know what's going on. Something that I have a problem with in this movie right off the bat is it feels like I'm reading issue 4 of a mainline and we didn't get to see 1 through 3. The performances are good, but they're hindered by the writing to some degree. I think the new Superman, let's just say it right off the bat, is great. I want to say right off the bat, he is my Superman. He's our new Superman. And I'm going to stick with that. I'm excited to see what comes next from him. But we don't get that focus really. So yeah, David Cornsweet, fantastic Superman. I think he's just held up a little bit by bad writing, and we'll get into that more later. Rachel Brosnahan, I think she is a really good Lois Lane comparative to what we have had previously in movies for Superman. I am excited to see more. She challenges Clark, she challenges Superman, and she is trying to be that very investigative reporter, and I appreciate that. As for Nicholas Hoult, once again, fantastic actor, held up by bad writing, and it's almost as if he's overperforming for the role. And I worry that this Lex is almost suffering a similar issue to what the Snyderverse Lex Luthor had, which kind of makes him seem a little bit like a crybaby. There are moments where he's very suave, calculated businessman, but then there's other moments where that cracks. And maybe it's because we're seeing this early version, only a few years into Superman, not the origin, but a few years in. Similar to how the Batman was presented to us, how, Pat Bat, he had already been Batman for a little bit. This is similar to what we get with this Superman for, David Cornsweet. As for the rest of the cast, the Justice Gang, we have Nathan Fillion as Green Lantern, and we have, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Gray, but Eddie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific. And then last but not least, we have Isabella Merced as Hawk Girl. I think they do a fantastic job. We don't get enough really of Hawk Girl to kind of see her stretch her legs a little bit into the role. But Nathan Fillion as, Guy Gardner, fantastic. Nathan Fillion's great. And Eddie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific. It's almost as if James Gunn wanted this to maybe be a project for Mr. Terrific. That if this wasn't a Superman movie, this could have been a Mr. Terrific movie. And that's kind of where we get this bloat, where this problem. There's too much focus on other things and trying to build this universe so quickly that it doesn't feel like we get enough Clark Kent. We don't get enough Superman. We don't get enough Kal-El. But at the same time, it feels like this Justice Gang is there to kind of pull out what, Superman is supposed to be. He's supposed to show them what it is to be a hero. Let's get into the basics of the movie. We're not going to do any spoilers, like I said. This movie focuses too much on Superman and not enough on Clark Kent. We get glimpses of it, but we never really get to see him be Clark Kent out of a few handful of scenes. And even then, it's almost as if he's still being Superman in those moments. I really hope that with this being the Superman film, with this being allegedly focused on Superman, for future DC projects, are we going to get even less Clark Kent? Are we going to get even less Superman? Because that is something I worry about, because what makes Superman is Clark Kent. Quote unquote real Superman fans will tell you that Superman's not the hero. It's Clark Kent that's the hero, right? It's the ideals that have been instilled by Ma and Pa Kent, right? That's what makes Superman. And I see that with James Gunn's Superman. I feel that. It's every life is sacred, every life is worth protecting. that we see in the trailers, the questioning of, but people were going to die in that interview with Lois. And that wasn't just Superman, that was also Clark Kent. The allowance of Superman being able to intervene on things. And it's because of that appreciation and that view of life in every life. This is your Superman that is going up trees and saving cats. And I think that's something that we want. But are we just doing that to be the opposite of what Zack Snyder's Superman was? The dark and brooding. People are always, comparing superheroes to the previous favorites. And I think that a lot of people look to the Justice League animated series as to what, maybe they're wanting, or, Christopher Reeve's Superman. But to go back to the Justice League one, the Justice League animated series was also very dark, but we also got a very good Superman. I think there's an allowed balance there to some degree. Oh, we got the Roku Village going on now. I'm just worried that we're going almost like too sweet here. Not that that's a problem. I just worry, like, are we doing this just to be the opposite of Zack Snyder? I don't know. In a way, it's almost as if this movie suffers from what Man of Steel dealt with, but just on the opposite end. We don't really get a Superman journey here. And I know the focus wasn't to be a Superman origin, but it's almost as if they just expected you to know everything. And as a Superman fan that knows these things, that's fine to me. But is that fine to a new audience that wants to jump in? And that's just Superman. We're not even talking about the other heroes that are in this. We're not talking about Hawkgirl. We're not talking about Green Lantern. We're not talking about Mr. Terrific. All these things are just supposed to be like implied understanding now for this audience. You might have an audience that comes and sees this movie and is like, oh, did I miss a previous film? But no, this is the beginning of James Gunn's DCU. To jump off of that, I just think that we're in this period where I think you can't do what Marvel did, right? Everyone is rushing to create these universes and not have the buildup. We had the failed Snyderverse. Are they going to try and do individual origin stories again and then build into something? Obviously, with James Gunn here, that's not the focus. You can't have this multi-origin story leading into meeting up like the Avengers and then building off of that. They're just starting with, a movie that is not the Avengers or not the Justice League, but it's like right before it, and then we're right into it. That's what it feels like it's starting with. I don't think they're willing to look that far into the future in terms of wanting to stretch it out. Because if you wanted to do something like that, that's, a 10 to 15 year plan. And I don't know if James Gunn had that in mind for this. Something that came to my mind, throughout the whole movie is, why does this Lois and Clark like each other? There's not really enough in the movie, without sharing anything, that leads me to believe that they're into each other. Other than it's Lois and Clark, they have to be together. It's because of that it doesn't feel believable, even though their chemistry is amazing. They did an amazing job with the casting of these two, and their chemistry on the screen is great. But I'm just sitting there being like, but why do they like each other? There was never something brought up to me that explained to me why they liked each other. And that's, I think, super important, not only as a fan of Superman, but also just as someone who's going to see a movie. Why do these two like each other? And that's not there. It just constantly felt like I needed to be in the know in order to enjoy this movie. And once again, is James Gunn making this for a new audience, or is he making it for current fans of the DC? I don't know. I think about this tweet that, I don't know how old it is now, but where James Gunn was asked, what DC character he'd like to work on. And he pretty much said he didn't want to work on any of the main three, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. He said he liked side characters. And that's so obvious in this movie. It's so obvious. Even though he has an understanding of the source material, once again, like I said, this movie could have been a Mr. Terrific movie. There are those James Gunn moments. There's the montages. There's the humor. and the focus on the side characters. And there's nothing wrong with focusing on side characters, but it's so obvious with James Gunn that he cares about the side characters, maybe sometimes more than the main character, which, the last time we got a Superman focused film was back in 2013 with Man of Steel. People, I think, were wanting that again. Not Man of Steel, but a focus on Superman. And I don't think James Gunn did enough of that here. There's a lot of discourse going on about whether or not Superman is woke. I think this is ridiculous. I think, Superman is an alien. He is an immigrant, to Earth, and that's it. He is here to protect humankind. I think that's really the end of the story. I really, seeing all the political discourse about this prior to me talking about it has been just so funny, because I think people have just completely lost the plot on what we're like looking into, like, this movie. And obviously James Gunn has been very political in his movies, and that is definitely at the forefront here in a couple ways. But the idea that Superman has gone woke, it's no different than what had been written, 50 plus years ago about how Superman is as a character. So I just want to push that aside and just mention that, because I just, seeing all that discourse on Twitter has just been a total dumpster fire and just completely hilarious to me. Something that I also noticed throughout the film is these moments where it almost feels like I'm looking at a comic still, and it's Superman being Superman, and it's these triumphant moments, but I don't feel as though they're earned. I feel like they're just being like, hey, look, it's your new Superman. This is the moment. Enjoy it. And then they use the John Williams score, for it. And it works sometimes, but other times I don't feel like it's earned. And I feel like they're just kind of giving us a little treat. And I don't think, like, the audience, in a weird way, has earned that yet, especially with how many times they did it in the film. Some of the shots are just great, and you're sitting there in awe, and you're like, oh my God, that's my Superman. That's amazing. But then the fourth time they do the same gag in the same movie, it's kind of like, all right, it's Superman, Let's talk about the side characters, non-heroes and non-villains. Let's talk about the Daily Planet cast. We have Jimmy Olsen and Something I enjoyed in the movie, and maybe others won't, is the brief glimpses at the Daily Planet. I really like the casting of Jimmy Olsen, Skylar Gisondo. I think he's going to fill that role pretty well if we keep going the direction that we're going here. And they kind of make him a lady killer in this movie, which is pretty funny and it's great. But in these moments in the Daily Planet, I got this, like, I don't know how to explain it other than saying this Smallville CW vibe, but like in like a film setting. And that was fun. It felt kind of homey to me. It felt kind of campy, and I loved that. And I think this movie has a lot of camp to it. And I think that's a good thing for it, rather than working against it. I think it's really fun. And I get that a lot coming into, any of the Daily Planet scenes, and it's fun. I also really enjoy, the new Perry, Wendell Pierce. Fantastic. I think he does a really good job with the few scenes that we get him in. I like the Daily Planet crew, and I'm excited to see more of it, if that is, in the future, for the James Gunn verse, because we don't know where it's going. I think another thing that was really difficult for me in this movie was, like, the range of technology, and we're just supposed to accept it. Something in the very beginning of the movie, they say that metahumans have been around for a while, so it's probably assumed that technological advances happen faster in this time period. But some of the tech just feels so out of place, only for it to be a narrative and plot device. And it's just this MacGuffin type technology. It just doesn't make sense, especially for, the character that it is. For Mr. Terrific, the technology makes sense. He's literally one of, if not the smartest man, right? And with what his tech is, it makes sense to his character. And there is other tech that just doesn't make sense. And when you see the movie, if you do, you'll understand what I'm saying, where it just feels like it's there to push things along, and it feels out of place. I'm not going to do a spoiler. I think what I'll do, I'm going to go see the movie another time. And I think with that, I will make a spoiler review afterwards when I've been able to kind of digest it more and then have a second viewing just to see if there's things that I've missed to discuss further. I'd love to hear what you have to think about this. Does the James Gunn universe have the legs? Is it paving the road for what is ahead? Do you think this was good enough as a start to Superman? Is this your Superman? I think that it can be mine. And from what they showed so far, it is. I came into this movie and I wanted it to be everything and more. And I think I left a little disappointed. I'm cautiously optimistic to see what is in store for us, especially with some of the projects that have already been announced. The Lantern Corps show, for one. But as for Superman on its own, as the only thing that we see right now, I'm unsure. There are things that I enjoyed, and there's things that I definitely did not enjoy. But as for the Superman character itself, I think he is great. But I want more. And I want more of Clark Kent. And I maybe want a little more Kal-El. But I want more Clark Kent. And we just didn't get that in this movie. I'm not going to do a score, but I'm going to say that I'm cautiously optimistic to what is coming. I lied. I'm going to give it a fucking score. And the score that I'm going to give Superman, James Gunn's new Superman, the beginning of his DC universe, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Maybe I'll bump it up when I see it again. But as of right now, it's a 6 out of 10. One more thing. I love Superman. I do. You have that holy trinity, Kal-El, Clark Kent, Superman. I love what Superman stands for. Hope for all mankind, for everyone, for every living being, because life is so sacred to him. I want that to be the focus. And I feel it sometimes, but I don't feel that focus in a Superman movie. Sometimes I'm just wondering, what the fuck are we even doing in the movie? Because the pacing just feels bad. Sometimes some things are super cut short, and now I'm even thinking about it now, about the James Gunn humor, where this movie also suffers from the same thing that other James Gunn movies and Marvel movies have suffered from, and that is cutting off an emotional moment with a joke, and jokes on characters that it doesn't really fit with. Especially Lex Luthor. He can be quippy, but it's not the James Gunn humor that fits Lex Luthor. It doesn't. And that happens too much in this movie. I don't get it. And the pacing. I feel like I'm in a learner's permit class to learn how to drive a car. And it's just gas, brake, gas, brake, gas, brake, gas, brake. And it's are things developing? Characters. Not so much the story. The story's moving forward, but are the characters developing through it? I don't know. I mean, the main focus is Superman, but it doesn't feel like that's happening. This movie feels like it's a retelling of something that we've already seen before. I think I've already said this, but Ma and Pa Kent are so important to what Superman is, and we get literally barely any glimpses of that. We get a taste, but we don't get to learn really why. And this all leads back to everyone just needing to know about Superman prior to going to see the movie. I really want to hammer the point that you don't need to make it an origin story, but you need to give us a little bit, especially for people who are new and not Superman fans. And that's not there. If you're a Superman fan watching this and you go see the movie by yourself or you go see it with friends, you know what's going on. But if you go see it with some friends who don't know Superman or don't know the DC too much, or you go with your family, it's that movie where they're going to turn to you and say, who is that guy? Why is he doing that? Why is their relationship like that? And the movie doesn't help them. It barely does any showing and it barely does any telling. But that's it. That's Superman. That's James Gunn's Superman, baby. I don't want to lead on that I hate this movie. I like it. It's very hopeful. It's positive. In the moments of Superman being Superman and Clark Kent being Clark Kent, it's great. But I want more. I want more of that. I wanted more. I wanted more of that, and I don't feel like I got it. Anyway, thank you for watching. It's been Jay Parm. Remember to like and subscribe. I appreciate y'all, and I'll see you in the next one. So stupid.